redistricting process. My name is Craig Slade. I'm the board attorney with Rankin Board of Supervisors. And in just a minute, I'll explain why I'm up here talking about this. Hopefully it'll become clear. The Constitution of the United States requires there to be a regular count of the population in our country for purposes of providing for an analysis of equal voting rights among our citizens. The primary principle of the redistricting process is that as populations and population counts change, there is the need to evaluate those population changes among existing political boundaries, states, counties, cities, and then the respective subsets within those categories that affect local races, local political positions, and otherwise. And because of the freedom of movement that we all enjoy in our country, we have populations that shift and adjust and change, and we're all familiar with how that works. And so each 10 years, we have the United States Census Bureau charged with the responsibility of taking a census so that there is a determination of the principle of equal voting rights among the political boundaries. In 2020, the United States Census Bureau engaged under difficult circumstances in the process of collecting the required census data. What we discovered was that the challenges that all of us are familiar with during that time period caused there to be some unique challenges for the collection of the data, but they were able to secure the information and to take it back and to provide the outcomes, albeit late. They're required by law to provide the information to the respective jurisdictions on before, I believe, March 1 of the year, or April 1 of the year after the year in which the census is collected. So April of 2021, the data should have been provided. They had done a good job of communicating that the data would be late in arriving. And so Rankin County and the state of Mississippi actually did not receive the data until late summer of 2021. So the data that has been received from census about our population trends that affect us here locally has only recently been received. The interesting thing about the data is that it just from the standpoint of what the perception of our population trends in Rankin County specifically have been, we anticipated a much higher level of growth than the actual census data related. And Mr. Dave Wade, who I'll introduce here momentarily from the Central Mississippi Planning and Development District, will give you some more information about the specific population data for Rankin County. But our perception was that we would see a much higher level of growth over the past 10 years in our county than what was reflected in the census data, surprisingly. What that means is that the actual process of redistricting is not going to be as involved for Rankin County as we would have otherwise anticipated. We haven't seen the level of growth, according to the census data, that will cause significant changes to the existing political boundaries in Rankin County. And so Mr. Wade will get into more detail there. The reason that we have a census, the reason that we are very specifically engaged on the issue of population and equal protection and voting rights is because we want each voter's vote to count to the same degree of any other voter, irrespective of where in the county they may live. that principle is often referred to as one person, one vote. You may have heard that phrase previously. And that is the overarching principle of the redistricting process. We want to be sure that voters in a given political district, political boundary, that their vote is not watered down by virtue of the fact that population trends have affected how many voters are in a given district. And so we recharacterize or recraft the actual districts so as to accomplish that goal, that each voter's vote will count as nearly as possible equal to any other voter's vote. So that is our overarching principle. For purposes of the redistricting process, the governing authorities who oversee that is determined generally by state law. In Mississippi, we are one of 33 states across the country that requires our legislature to determine the redistricting process. Other states use a different process. But for Mississippi, the state legislature determines political boundaries that affect the state of Mississippi. So our congressional delegation, Senate and House, the state legislative delegation, and for purposes of other types of political boundaries that are statewide in orientation, all of that is handled by the state of Mississippi legislature. The legislature is not vested with authority to deal with political boundaries that affect counties. In counties in Mississippi, the body that is responsible, the political body that is responsible for determining the county's political boundaries, district boundaries, is the Board of Supervisors. That's why we're having this meeting here today. And what you will be hearing from this podium today, from Mr. Wade and anyone else who chooses to speak, is that this discussion will be about political boundaries and districts in Rankin County. If you're here today to find out what the city of Flowood is going to do with municipal districts, or the city of Pearl, or the city of Brandon, or Richland, or Florence, or Puckett, or Pelahatchie, you won't hear anything about that, because the county, the Board of Supervisors, has nothing to do with political districts that affect cities. The individual cities and the governing authorities of the cities will determine their own political boundaries. We'll make that clear so that nobody's confused about what's going to be talked about here. I think I've covered all I need to cover from an introductory standpoint. The Rankin County Board of Supervisors, especially given the fact that the population trends and information only come around every 10 years, it is impossible for there to be some level of memory about what we did 10 years ago. When you have changeover in the actual Board of Supervisors, nobody remembers what we did 10 years ago that impacted the 2010 census and how we dealt with that issue. I was around, but I don't remember exactly how that played out. And because there's no institutional memory about that, my Board of Supervisors said, you know what, we probably need somebody that knows what's going on with redistricting to help us with that process. And so Rankin County, through the Board of Supervisors, it has entered into an agreement with Central Mississippi Planning and Development District to utilize CMPDD's expertise and resources to help guide us through the redistricting process. Mr. David Wade is a senior planner with CMPDD, very well versed in the redistricting process, and is our go-to guy, along with others in their organization, to help us navigate the redistricting process. I'd like for Mr. Wade to come forward now and walk you guys through the redistricting process and give you some information about the population data for Rankin County. Before he steps forward, I want to close with this thought. Unless people have questions, I need to comment further. This will be the closing thought from me. It's this: the redistricting process is a process. I mentioned to you that we got the population data late. So we are early in the process. There is no redistricting plan on the table initiated by the Rankin County Board of Supervisors as of today. I don't know the answer to an inevitable question, when will you have a plan? Answer, I don't know. More than likely, relatively soon. We don't anticipate significant changes to our current redistricting process, but that could change. At some point, there will be a plan. At some point, that plan will be publicized. At some point, there will be a public hearing whereat comments, communication, objections, etc., can be made to my board before they vote on and adopt a redistricting plan for Rankin County. There is a process. It's a public process. It's conducted in public meetings. It will be on display and for review before it is finally adopted at some point. I anticipate the adoption would happen, more than likely, early in 2022. Okay? Hopefully that information helps you to sort of, as it relates to a roadmap of where this thing is headed. Mr. Wade?
Thank you, Craig. Again, my name is David Wade. I work for the Central Mississippi Planning and Development District. I've had the privilege, well, first I'll tell you a little bit about our organization. CMPD is a regional planning organization. It actually covers 7 counties in the Central Mississippi region, with Rankin County being one of the 3 metro counties, obviously. I also am a resident of Rankin County, so I've had the privilege of working with the county. This will be our 3rd redistricting in my nearly 30 years with the district. The process, I hope everybody got a handout. If you didn't, there's some on this table up here. The process is kind of outlined on that first page. As Craig mentioned, the goal is to balance the population of the 5 supervisor district boundaries as well as the 4 judicial court boundaries. In doing that, we determine what is an ideal population. In other words, you take the Census Bureau's count of 157,000+ persons in Rankin County, divide that 5 ways. I believe it comes out around 29,000, 30,000. I don't have the ideal population in front of me. But then you determine which areas had more growth and what population needs to shift. Obviously, you can't get an exact number, even number in each district. So the Department of Justice allows what we call a top to bottom deviation or variance. Whereas, as long as you can keep the heaviest populated district and the lightest populated district, the combined difference, percentage difference in those 2, combined should be at least less than 10%. So in other words, if your heaviest populated supervisor district was 3% over the ideal variance or the ideal population rather, and your lightest was 3% under, combined difference would be 6%, well within the allowed 10. The process obviously is we wait for the Census Bureau to release the numbers. We got those mid-September. We overlaid those onto the election district lines, in this case supervisor districts as well as justice court districts, to see where we're at. In Rankin County, it looks like, just glancing down, Supervisor District 1 was about 2,200 short of the ideal. District 2 was about 1,200 over. District 3 was about 2,100 over. District 4 was about 2,100 under. And District 5 was almost right on. It was about 900 over, but it's well within the allowable deviation. What we see happening, more than likely, just our cursory look at it, we haven't taken a deep dive, but just looking at the map And the numbers, we know that District 3 will more likely need to give some population to 1. District 2 will more likely need to give some population to 4. That's just the way the map lays out. It just makes sense to shift those lines a little bit. And you know, that's not a lot of population movement in a county of over 150,000. A couple, you know, 1 or 2,000 here or there. As Craig mentioned, we don't anticipate major changes, which is a good thing because it lessens voter confusion. You know, when you come in and make wholesale changes to your lines, it tends to lead to voter confusion. If we can move as few people as possible, that's the ideal thing to do. As you can see, looking down the process, the effort is to overlay those lines, see where we're at, initiate the process. The Board of Supervisors has already adopted guidelines, you'll see on page 2. These are standard guidelines that were used, I know, in the last effort 10 years ago. And they are standard among other communities, I will say. I'm doing this in about 17 jurisdictions this time. And that's pretty standard as far as guidelines go. We'll initiate the process by meeting with the board, looking at options. More than likely, we can come up with some plans in-house, take it to the board supervisor, see if they're acceptable, get their input, maybe adjust it if needed. Hold public hearings, or a public hearing. The board can then adopt both justice court and supervisor plans. After that effort, we will work with the election commissioners to redraw precincts, to reduce any splits that may have occurred. Again, that's to reduce voter confusion and to help facilitate voting efforts. But as far as the process, I don't know that there's much else I can say. We utilize our GIS capabilities to help redraw those lines. We overlay the district lines on census blocks. I did fail to mention that that's kind of our building blocks. We have to use census geography, so it's a visible line. Hopefully in most cases. We work with the county's GIS department. Once that's done, we redraw precincts. We'll turn all the data over to the county so they can provide it in-house and host it on the county's website as they currently do. But that's pretty much the process. It's not a lot to it, especially in a case where you have, you know, anticipated small changes.
In 2010, the population of Rankin County was, round numbers, between 141,000 and 142,000. According to the Census Bureau, in 2020, the population of Rankin County went from 10 years prior, 141-ish, I think I'm right on that, to 157,000. That is modest growth for a county of our size, and really doesn't comport with what we see and perceive about the growth of Rankin County over that time period. Question?
Yes. I wonder if Wade might have some data on where that population went. Did it go into rural areas or urban areas?
Specifically, I would have to sit down with the census data and look at block by block level. We have not gotten to that point yet. I think just being a resident of the county, we all kind of know where the growth primarily is. District 2, I believe, is the reservoir area. We know there's continued growth, even like during the slowdown, the housing slowdown a few years back. The growth kind of continued out in that area, so we can continue to see that. Also, I believe it's District 3 is the other high growth one, which would be kind of that southeast portion of Brandon and southeast corner of the county. It was the other high growth district. So from a supervisor district standpoint, I can tell you that 2 and 3 were your highest growth areas. To get more specific, I would need to look at the actual census blocks to kind of drill down to where the growth actually happened for this.
So practically practically speaking, the growth occurred around the reservoir for purposes of the county, and the area around the city of Brandon. Those were the two highest driving factors of population growth trends. You saw population decreases in and around the unincorporated areas in Florence, out from Richland, to a lesser degree, the south end of Pearl, the west end of Pearl. Those areas there had less of a population increase, if I can say it that way, than the other two areas that we just documented. So this is just a very high-level look, not drilling down the data specifically. What we have also found is that we believe that there was significant underreporting, and that resulted in, we believe, unfortunately for Rankin County, an undercount of the actual population. I don't know if anybody on the county side that believes, practically speaking, we only grew over 10 years by the equivalent of 15,000 residents. Our additional employee count for Rankin County and operating county government suggests that the population is significantly more increased than that just over the last 10 years. We've got more people working for the county and more ground to cover and more responsibilities for road maintenance and all the other things supervisors are good at doing. And it suggests strongly building permits, requests for new construction, new development activity, all of those things tend to suggest strongly that the population is significantly higher than census tells us it is. So I did want to draw your attention to the redistricting guidelines. Dave hit on it, but I think it bears talking about this briefly right here. These guidelines are factors that are utilized so that our process of redistricting can remain uniform and sort of keep us on target for what redistricting is about and what we're trying to accomplish. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of those that really stand out to me. The districts have to be contiguous. We can't have districts that are separated by landmass and ask a supervisor, a justice court judge, an election commissioner to account for district boundaries that don't touch. And so that should be a basic principle of redistricting. And because the districts have to be contiguous, there are limitations on how you can draw them to account for the purposes of redistricting. And that's why we're allowed to have some level of deviation between the districts so that it's okay if each district is not precisely equal in population with other districts. We're given flexibility to account for the fact that not every district is shaped the same as every other. Not every district has the same communities that need to be kept together. That's another principle. There are geographical boundaries, the reservoir, creeks, roads. There are geographical reasons why districts need to be shaped the way that they are, and that's allowed under our guidelines. Natural geographic boundaries where possible. Incumbents shall be separated into individual districts to the extent practicable. We don't want to draw an incumbent out of office and kick him out of office or her out of office by virtue of this process. If they're going to be kicked out of office, it ought to be the voters that do that and not some process called redistricting that does it automatically. And so we have to be careful about that and look at that as an issue. And we will account for errors in the census data. The last one, I want to highlight that. We are confident in Rankin County that there are errors in the census data as collected. And we will avail ourselves of the process to account for those errors as we find them and to communicate that back to census. Unfortunately, it's totally up to census to decide whether or not they accept our communication of an error or not. If they don't agree, the number doesn't change. If they've got census blocks that are erroneously coded in their system, in other words, they've got voters showing up living in one place when they actually live in another, and we point that out to them, it will not be unheard of that they tell us, thank you for letting us know. And that's it. The data doesn't change. It happened in 2010, and we fully expect the same thing to happen here. We're dealing with an imperfect process as it relates to that. We'll do the best that we can to make the best plan that we can, and we'll have the best plan that we can within the limitations that the federal law deposits. Questions? There's one question. Did I answer your question about the population, how it's moved, what we're seeing? By the way, this is being recorded. It will be uploaded onto the website so that it can be viewed. Questions? Yes, sir?
When do you expect public hearings to start, sir?
Well, those will be placed in the newspaper. You will just need to monitor that. We also place on our website, this may be news to some of you, but each of our public meetings and agendas are published to our website before our meetings. Now, I'm not going to promise you that it's 48 hours before our meeting. It may be 24 hours before our meeting. But the agendas and the dates and times of all of our public meetings are published to our website. By the way, if the supervisors are meeting, unless it's a special set meeting, it's the same time every time, 9 a.m. Every time we have a public meeting, 9 a.m. in the Board of Supervisors boardroom, 211 East Government Street, Brandon. We meet on the first Monday of every month. That's our statutory board meeting. We're required to meet that day. That would be the only meeting where we are not required to post notice of the meeting. That's because we meet every first Monday every time unless it's a legal holiday, and then we meet on the Tuesday. Okay? We meet on the 15th of every month unless it's a weekend or a holiday, and we do publish notice of that meeting. It's on our website. We have a work session. If you're taking notes, I'll try to speak slowly. The work session is on the last Thursday before the first Monday. Every time. Sometimes that is not the last Thursday of the month. Sometimes it's a Thursday that's before the first Monday, but it's the same month. Okay? The last Thursday before the first Monday is a work session. 9 a.m. You asked, when will we have a public hearing on redistricting? I can't give you an answer. Until we have a plan that has been presented, that my board is ready to undertake, it won't be on an agenda for action. So, I would anticipate sometime in early 2022. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes. The data that you have referred to, is that available out there on the website somewhere?
The census data itself is available through census.gov. You can actually pull that down from U.S. Census. So the Census Bureau itself has put out the data.
The data that you all talked about?
Yes, sir. Everybody gets the data from census. That's where it has to start. They send that, they download that. It goes first to the state of Mississippi, and then it's pushed out to the individual political subdivisions. But the same data is available to anybody on Census's website. Yes, sir.
Will there be any preliminary maps that will be prepared or whatever like that when that board of supervisors meeting is scheduled on redistricting?
Yes, sir. So the actual maps themselves can be made available and publicized. I'm assuming that CMPDD will do whatever we think is appropriate. I remember back in 2011 when we were walking through this process, we actually had maps that reflected the current district boundaries and the proposed. That's something that we can certainly make available, put it on the website, and demonstrate it that way, and have it available in the board meetings. Other questions? We have election commissioners with us today. They joined with us being board supervisors. I'm here representing the board supervisors. Our county administrator, Keith Hicks, is here. Any of us can hang around and help to try to direct or answer any questions or provide information. If we can't answer your question today, we can take your question down and try to get an answer for you. So Mr. Hicks is a good source to give a question to if you need to. Tanya Rivers, District 3 Election Commissioner. Tanya is actually serving, I don't know if it's voluntary or not, but she's the chairman of the Election Commission, and I want Tanya to introduce her colleagues on the Election Commission so that you can get a look at least 3 of your commissioners here today.
Right here next to me in the front row is Michael Chandler. He's District 4.
Hello.
And then right behind him is Paul Hawley, and he is District 2.
That's right. Election commissioners' districts precisely mirror supervisor districts. That's not the case for every county district. Constables, we only have 4 of those. We have 4 justice court judges. So justice court judge districts and constable districts do not mirror supervisor districts. You can understand why. We don't have to divide the population up by 5 ways. We divide it up by 4 for justice court judges and for constables. So there's deviation among the districts. The board of supervisors is responsible for establishing those districts. We will segregate those districts so that each of them has, as close as possible, the same amount of population in each for purposes of preserving and protecting the primary principle of one voter, one vote equals all other voter and all other voters. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Yes, sir.
I noticed they're a county entity, and they have Board of Education and School District, which is a county entity, and they have district lines. Of course, we know Pearl is a 0 school district within there with 5 school board members. Do they have a separate map drawing line that they put in place through CMPDD?
We have not been approached by the school district. We certainly can help them redraw those lines if they would desire. We'd be glad to help out. This particular contract with the county is for the supervisor district lines and justice court lines, and also the voting precincts. I think I mentioned earlier, work with the election commissioners to try to reduce, because anytime you shift a line around, you take a chance on splitting the precinct. We try to reduce that as much as possible. So we'll work with you guys as well as the circuit clerk's office to hopefully move as few people around as possible and reduce any confusion to the extent we can, and help them update their voter rolls as well. So I think last time we spent a lot of time with the circuit clerk's office, just kind of helping them. They use a different system, SIMS voting system, but we try to provide as much data, digital data as we can to the clerk's office, so it makes their job a little easier on updating SIMs. So, but we'll be glad to answer your question. We'll be glad to work with the school district if they ask.
That's not automatic, and we don't address school district boundaries.
Understood.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Are you all doing municipal lines as well?
I think you came in after I had mentioned that previously, so I'll go over that one more time. The way that redistricting works is each political subdivision is responsible for their own redistricting, okay? And so the state is responsible for the redistricting that relates to the state of Mississippi. Counties are responsible for redistricting that relates to county district boundaries. And cities are themselves responsible for everything that is associated with redistricting within the context of a municipal boundary. So if it's a city redistricting question, you'll need to address that to the specific city, the mayor, the board of aldermen of that city. County does not impact or deal with municipal redistricting. Okay? Any other questions? Like I said, we'll be hanging around for a few minutes. But that concludes the presentation as it relates to the redistricting process, kind of at a high level. If you've got specific questions, see one of us, Mr. Hicks, myself, one of the election commissioners. And if you give us a question that we don't know the answer to, we will do what we can to try to get an answer and get it up on the website so that everybody can see. Thank you very much for coming today.